We know, Donald Trump said that I'm gonna get back to the Western Hemisphere. He was talking about, somehow bringing the soldiers back home, but it doesn't seem that is the policy anymore.
This isn't about soldiers so much anyway. It's really about air forces and navies when you talk about China. It's not much about soldiers. My Marines had a cup they gave me when we graduated the last class. And the cup said around the circle on it, it said Marine Corps War College. And on the top, it said the shark and the tiger. And what that cup meant was the metaphor that we used in our exercises. The shark, the United States of America, Navy Air, can't go ashore and wouldn't dare go ashore in China. And the elephant or the bear, whatever you want to use for China, can't come into the sea because we will have attrited their Navy and their Air Force to the extent that most of what they left is their ground force. So what do you do then? Well, you go to nuclear weapons because you're not going ashore and you have not won. You have not won. You may have attrited their Air Force and their Navy, and they attrit ours significantly too. So we're both sitting there roughly in the perimeter of the South China Sea, and we both have had our Air Forces reduced by a third or more, and our ships reduced, and our subs reduced by a third or more. And we're looking at each other. If you will, picture it. We're in the South China Sea at maybe the -9 line. We don't dare go any further. They won't venture forth with their fleet because they'll lose more of them. They won't venture with their air any further than the -9 line. And so we're sitting there looking at each other. And I'll tell you what the lieutenant colonel or the colonel in the war game says at that point: we need to use nuclear weapons. And the civilian leaders in the war game will say, no, we're not going there. Well, we've got civilian leaders now that I'm not sure will say that. So we're talking about a nuclear conflict is what we're talking about. And as I've told you before, we've got people in the labs, young people, technically qualified to the max. We've got people in the Pentagon who are talking now about, for example, a first strike, riding out anything that retaliates and being alive afterwards and being victorious. We're talking about nuclear war as a tool of modern warfare. And that's what this leads to. That's what this strategy leads to.
But the problem is, if the United States decides to go on some sort of preemptive attack, if they to call it preemptive attack, and they do that, none of these countries gonna, sit aside and watch what's going on with the other. I'm talking about Russia and China. If they hit China, Russia is not gonna be quiet about it. They're
That's
not gonna be silent about it.
That's a part, I think, of Trump's rapprochement with Moscow is to try to peel them away a bit. But read the strategy really closely. What we're going to do to China in our own hemisphere is get them out.
Mm.
That's what we want to do first and foremost. Did you know that every country in South America's trade last year was more with China than with the U.S.?
Exactly.
That's what they want to do. They want to get them out. That's the reason Rubio is going around trying to recruit leaders in South America. They want to root China out, root and branch out of the Western Hemisphere. Then they'll take them on. But this idea of being in the Western Hemisphere is all about fighting China in the Western Hemisphere. And for that matter, anybody else who wants to come in and take our place. But China is the preeminent power that's doing this.
How you can be the enemy of all these countries, and I don't understand it, Larry, because there has to be some sort of alternative for their policy, because so far I didn't
Thank
see
you.
that would be much successful. Their
Thank
attitude is
you.
not working. It's not resonating here in Brazil, at least.
When we took office in 2001, after that adumbrated transition because of the hanging Chad election, I'm talking about George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. When we took office, the president ordered us, the policy planning staff at the State Department under Richard Haas, to develop the new national security strategy. 2 years later, we still didn't have a national security strategy. You know why? Because everyone we wrote at the State Department and sent to Dr. Rice, the national security advisor, she refused to accept. So what did she do? After about 18 months, Haas got frustrated. So did we. She tasked her own staff on the National Security Council to write the national security strategy. She didn't like that either. You know what she did then? She contracted it out to a civilian group. What do you bet Trump and Hegseth did? Think Project 25. Think the Heritage Group. Think who actually wrote that national security strategy. Probably. That's my guess anyway. And just think of what they've been saying all along, what they've been doing both domestically and internationally. And you'll see that they have concluded, and rightfully so, that the number one, not narco-terrorism. Narco-terrorism is not a threat. The threat to the United States of America is the People's Republic of China, economically, militarily, socially, culturally, you name it, they're our threat. Now, your point is well taken. Mearsheimer and Walt don't have to be right. You know, the realists do not have to be right. There's nothing written in stone that they are right come hell or high water. We do not have to have a war. This Thucydides trap and all this crap about rising power, declining power, they will inevitably fight. Maybe once upon a time that was remotely true, but with nuclear weapons, we don't want it to be true. So yes, there is a way to keep from doing this. And it is not to try to challenge China every time they move anywhere at any time in any place. The way to do it is to accommodate. And I don't mean, you know, people say, oh, well, that's what Neville Chamberlain did with Hitler. And look at what we got. I'm not talking about that kind of accommodation. I'm talking about accommodating the fact that power is waning from the West and going to the East, and dealing with that as empires have done throughout history when they had to do it. You continue and you make money. Your economy thrives. You deal with the potential enemy. He deals with you. You work things out diplomatically, economically, financially, and so forth. You don't go to war. There is nothing preordained about humans going to war except crass stupidity. And God knows there's plenty of that in the world.
Larry, do you see the ability or the possibility of the United States playing a charming role instead of putting pressure on other countries? Because that's the way that China behaves. They're looking for partners. They're looking for someone to work with.
Exactly.
How is that going? Is there anybody concerned about this sort of attitude? Putting pressure, for example, here in Brazil, by putting pressure on Lula, what are they going to achieve? I see nothing coming out of this sort of policy.
You're absolutely right. They treat it as a zero-sum game. If they win, we lose. If we win, they lose. There's no one sitting down and saying, let's figure out a win-win situation. More often than not, that's accomplishable, where one person wins, another person wins a little, one person wins a lot, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, good diplomacy means it comes out to where both have a reasonable standard of living, both have a reasonable opportunity to develop their own people in their own ways. This bullshit about liberal democracy should be thrown on the pits of fire. If China wants to run its country this way, and Russia wants to run its country this way, and Brazil wants to run its country this way, so be it. Who are we to say how other people run their states? Let's get along. And I'm not talking about kumbaya getting along. I'm talking about there are ways to design economies that makes them mutually reinforcing, not mutually antagonistic. But the latter is all we seem to be able to think about and do. And if one country is more GDP'd than another country, more purchasing parity capable than another country, so be it. Let's have some competition and see if we can't catch up. This being on the strategy that came out of the Bush administration said this, Nima, and this is just a follow on to it with different wrinkles. It said, we won the Cold War. We're the champions of the world. We're at the top of the mountain. Anything that stirs at the bottom of the mountain, a mouse, a rat, we're going to kill it. We're going to smash it. We'll either sanction it or use military force on it, or both. That's what we said. Didn't work very well. It didn't work very well at all. In fact, we've got more Al Qaeda in the world right now as a result of the global war on terror than we had before 9/11.
Yeah.
There are more Al Qaeda people on the earth now than there were before 9/11. It just doesn't work. But we don't seem to know this. We don't seem to know how to deal with people in the world like we had to for about 150 plus years when we weren't the big dude on the block. We did it fairly well. We dealt with the French Empire, the British Empire, the Spanish Empire, the Russian Empire, and we got along pretty well. Now we're the dominant empire and we can't get along with anybody. That makes very little sense, except that that's the way Yankees usually do.
Somehow it feels that they don't care about Latin America. They don't see anybody relevant in Latin America.
Look at what they're doing
It's usually dangerous, Larry, in my opinion.
No, you're right. Look at. I was talking with people yesterday about this. We've got all this mess down there in Puerto Rico. We've got a mess in Jamaica. We've got a mess in Cuba. We got a mess from that Melissa and other hurricanes that preceded that. And what are we doing? We're putting troops on Puerto Rico to threaten Venezuela. This is absurd. Even George W. Bush in 2003, when BAM was hit by an earthquake in Iran, 30,000 people died, 200,000 people were injured. We sent search dogs, fire trucks. We sent food. We sent water. We sent everything we could over there because it was a humanitarian disaster. Well, we got a Caribbean replete with humanitarian disasters right now. In Santiago de Cuba, 15,000 roofs were blown off. No one has a home they can live in. It's incredible. And Jamaica's not much better off in certain areas too. And what are we doing? We don't know how to live in the world, Nima. And in our own hemisphere, we don't know how to treat the people who live in our area.
Here is, Larry, what Donald Trump said about Maduro.
Days are numbered and that the U.S. could soon strike Venezuelan territory. Could we see American troops on the ground in Venezuela?
I don't comment on that. I wouldn't say that one way or the other. I can say this, that he sent us millions of people, many from prisons, many drug dealers and drug lords, and mental institution, people in mental institutions. He sent them into our country where we had a very stupid president. You know that. Biden's a low IQ person, especially nowadays. I mean, he was low IQ 30 years ago, but he was especially low IQ now. And what he did to our country is not good. Tren de Aragua, the gangs, one of the meanest gangs in the world.
You've locked down the border now.
No, he sent a lot of these people. He also sends in a lot of drugs. So we'll see how it all works out.
So
But I can't talk about
So
strategy.
how far would you?
It's all about Biden.
There is about as much threat to the United States from narco-terrorists, as he has coined it, and Hegseth has made it a term of art, as there is from the Gulf of Mexico mounting an avalanche across Texas and going to the Canadian border. I mean, this is absurd. It's what George W. Bush did, but at least George W. Bush had some justification, you could say. 3,000 Americans were dead, billions of dollars of damage done, and all by a bunch of Al-Qaeda terrorists who flew airplanes. Most of that was our fault, by the way, but nonetheless, they did damage, and he had his rage up and he had to do something. This is absurd. All the things that he just said about Venezuela or anyone in the world being responsible for all these kinds of nasty people coming into the United States and doing all this stuff, it's just absurd. Yeah, there's some bad people who got in, MS-13, things like that, gangs. If you put them all in a package and said, okay, how much of a threat does this really mount toward the United States of America? It'd be less than 0.001%. It wouldn't even measure on the Richter scale, as it were. And yet we're making everything out of it. We're making a mountain out of a molehill, in other words. But we did the same thing in my administration with terrorism. We told George W. Bush, you can't use the military instrument against these people. You will make them warriors. We've dealt with these people in the past with law. with the legal regime. We've put them in jail where they belong. They're criminals. They're not warriors. What did we do? We made them warriors. We made them such warriors, Neiman, that we went to Syria and allied ourselves with them and tried to overthrow Assad using them, ISIS, Al Qaeda, and so forth. So this is just stupid. It's just stupid to the maximum to take the military instrument and apply it against something that is amorphous and is not really a threat in a significant way as we're doing now. Look at what it's led to. It's led to maximum violations of international law, violations of our own Constitution, our own domestic law, violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and it's leading to a contamination of our armed forces because you see now so many people of flag rank going along with this. Every one of them should be standing up and being counted right now. Every one of them. And they're not. Just like they didn't at Quantico at that meeting. They just stayed stonily silent. Well, stone cold silence is not what we need now. What we need is people saying, this is against the law and I will not do it upon forfeiture of my rank and my future in the military if necessary, but I will not do it. Do you see many doing that? Got one admiral, apparently, one admiral, the admiral at Southern Command, who's leaving now in December, sometime I'm told in December. And I'm told now with clarity, I think, that the reason he's leaving is because of this mess of killing people on the high seas without any real due process. This is death by 1,000 blows. We're weaving our own death shroud. That's what we're doing. And Trump is the master weaver. And that's pitiful. That is absolutely pitiful because he came in and was elected to be the exact opposite.